The great humanitarian Albert Schweitzer said of Dr. Max Gerson, "I see in him one of the most eminent geniuses in medical history." And tonight we are privileged to have with us Dr. Gerson's daughter, Charlotte Gerson. And her life is really a living tribute and a working tribute to her father and his work and his vision of health and prevention and hope for thousands of us. So it's with deep gratitude and tremendous joy and a real honor for me to introduce to you Charlotte Gerson.
Thank you very much, Kathy, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And I'd also like to start out by saying thank you very much to Beverly and whoever else was responsible in providing me a delicious, organic, vegetarian meal, just the Gerson type of meal that I am happy with tonight. It's interesting that healing cancer came out of migraine headaches. My father was a regularly trained physician. He went to regular medical school. He learned regular medical approach to healing, which isn't healing. It's drugs and drugging. But it so happened that he had inherited migraine headaches. And when he was past internship into residency, the headaches got so bad that sometimes he was in bed in a darkened room for 2 or 3 days out of the week. And he was suffering and miserable, and he went to his professors and teachers and said, "What can I do? I'm sick and I can't function and I can't manage and I don't want to live like this." And they referred him to the books and said, "Look, you know, in the books there's nothing you can do. Migraine headaches, you learn to live with them, and when you're about 55 you'll feel better." Hey, wait a minute, I'm only 26, I can't do that. But there was no guide, there was no lead, there was nothing that he could find that would give him any pointers about what to do. And he wasn't willing to live with it. He decided he must find a way that he should be well. Finally, somehow, somewhere, some vague suggestion was made by a patient that it had helped her to change her diet. Diet, he thought, not a bad idea. These spasms he was suffering from, the pain, the nausea, the eyes, the sensitivity to the light and everything, it would very likely come from a metabolic problem. So maybe diet is an answer. But he had no guidance there either. So he went into his books again, and he thought, milk. Any baby can handle milk. My body ought to be able to stand milk. And he started to do nothing but drink milk. And he was just as sick as ever. Then he thought about that some more, and it occurred to him that nowhere in nature do adult animals drink milk. And he decided that was not the right approach. So instead he thought, well, what do the simians, the type of animals that are similar to our body structures, what do they eat? They eat fruits and nuts. Well, he thought fruits. Start with that. Now in Germany, apples are always plentiful fruit, and of course Dr. Gerson lived and studied and worked there. So he decided to start with apples. And he ate nothing and drank nothing but apples. Apple juice and baked apples and raw apples and applesauce, every kind of apple. And he was free of migraines. Now that was the beginning. Then he added one thing after another to see whether he could handle it, whether his body could take it or not. And if he happened onto something that he wasn't able to handle, he could have a migraine within 20 minutes. So he knew that food's out. And after a while, he worked up what he called his migraine diet, which meant for himself. And later on, when he was settled in his practice, patients would come to him and complain of migraines. And he would tell them, look, all the books say there's nothing you can do, but I have migraine headaches, and I have discovered that when I eat certain foods, this, and this, I am fine. Why don't you try it? And pretty soon he had a whole group of patients who had all recovered on his migraine diet. But one patient came to him and he said, listen, Dr. Gerson, my migraines are gone, they're much better, but I also had skin tuberculosis, which is called lupus vulgaris. I also had skin tuberculosis, and that's gone. So my father said, no, that's impossible. It's an incurable disease, and there is no healing for it, and must have been something else. But the man produced laboratory tests and bacteriological studies. No, he did in fact have skin tuberculosis. My father said, let me see that. Nobody had ever seen skin tuberculosis heal. What does it look like? And he saw this lesion healing on his arm. And he was flabbergasted. And you see, his shingle said internal and nerve diseases because he had worked under the teachings and under the professor Ottfried Förster, the foremost neurosurgeon in Germany. And he had become a neurologist, internal and nerve diseases. So he said, look, I don't see any of these skin diseases. Please send me some patients. Do you know others who have it? Oh, yes, of course. In the hospital where I was, a lot of my friends. So my father said, I'll treat them free of charge. I just want to see whether they too respond. He thought there must maybe a connection with the migraine. But after a little while, he had had a whole number of skin tuberculosis patients, and they got well. Now, this was something entirely new. This came to the ears of Professor Sauerbruch in Munich, who was the world-famous lung surgeon who invented a pressurized machine that made it possible to do surgery on the lungs. He was very well known. And of course, he also treated TB. And when this came to the ears of Professor Sauerbruch, he set up a study, 450 cases of incurable skin tuberculosis, treated with the Gerson therapy. 446 recovered. And that was a new one, and that made world news. However, my father wasn't satisfied with that. He said, if skin tuberculosis can be healed, why not other forms of tuberculosis? You know, there's bone tuberculosis, kidney tuberculosis, lung tuberculosis, encephalitis, and so on, tubercular. And sure enough, other patients came to him that suffered from other forms of tuberculosis, and with the same migraine diet, he treated them, and they responded. And then later in Berlin, under the authorship of Professor Zondig and two other top lung tuberculosis physicians with only terminal cases that were certified by 3 top authorities to be terminal, he only accepted those. And he treated them with this nutritional method, all new. Nobody ever heard of such a thing with tuberculosis. And they recovered. But now he found out something new. Many of those patients had other problems. Some had allergies, some had asthma, some had blood pressure problems, some had kidney disease, some had arthritis, and so on. And in the course of healing the tuberculosis, the other problems disappeared too. And now he was in a whole new ballpark. Now he was no longer a physician treating a disease with a specific approach. Now he was getting the body to heal itself of whatever ailed it. And that's a whole different approach to medicine. Still in medicine nowadays. Now remember, this was as far back as the 1920s and in the early 30s. Still today in medicine, every doctor diagnoses, and for your specific diagnosis, you get a drug, a pill, a surgery, or something like that. And it never heals. Because healing is making whole, restoring, rebuilding, reactivating the body's own healing mechanism. And now comes something very interesting. Tuberculosis happens to be a disease of the immune system. It's an invasion of a bacterium. TB is a bacillus. So if people get TB, clearly their immune system is weak, and is unable to deal with this germ, if now with a nutritional healing approach you can get rid of the TB, clearly you have restored, reactivated, rebuilt, and strengthened the immune system. Now, I don't need to tell you what that implies as far as AIDS is concerned. In the meantime, though, Dr. Gerson found that he could heal chronic hepatitis, an infection, Epstein-Barr, mononucleosis, all these so-called incurable invasions, bacteria and viruses, etc., that people suffer from for long term and get a little worse all the time, never really can overcome. All these things can be cleared up. But if you are able to do that, you have clearly restored and strengthened and rebuilt the immune system. So I dare tell you now that if you keep your immune system strong and well by eating correctly, you never need to get infections, including AIDS. Okay? AIDS, as you know, the word stands for acquired immune deficiency syndrome. If it's acquired, you're not born with it. If it's an immune deficiency, you can't buy a debt. You got to get your body weakened and damaged. You got to hurt it and weaken the immune system. And that's the next thing I want you to look at a little bit. What is this immune system people are talking about? What is it? There are very few people that really have a basic understanding of what it is. Most of you people know that in your bone marrow, in the legs and the long bones, there is a production of white blood cells. And you probably also know that some of those white blood cells are matured in other organs of the body. For instance, the T lymphocytes, they're matured in the thymus gland, the T lymphocytes. Others are matured, of all things, would you believe, in the appendix? And here for years doctors thought the appendix was useless. It's not. So that the body systems first build up the white blood cells, then mature them to do their specific jobs. But that's not the whole immune system by any means. The liver is very important in the immune system and had its own reticular endothelial system to protect this very important organ. But the liver also generates antitoxins that when you get a toxic material into your system, a virus that generates a toxic material, a bacterium, the liver generates an antibody, an antitoxin to these materials. The liver will help defend you, provided your liver is working. And that's the important thing to remember. There are whole organ systems that all work together to form the immune system. It's not one little box, little black box in your body that when you push a button it works. There are systems all over, cell systems, organ systems, that if they work correctly and properly, you cannot get an infection settling in your body and doing you in. Now, you can't just push a button either, because all these organ systems, they all need to be nourished correctly and properly. And a Frankfurter isn't going to do it. And ice cream isn't going to do it. And Coca-Cola isn't going to do it. There are no nutrients in there. The true nutrients are not proteins. Unfortunately, people are brainwashed and told that they need lots and lots of proteins to build a lot of healthy tissue and to rebuild worn-out tissue and so on. One of the major problems in the so-called civilized countries is excess protein. Excess protein can cause almost all of the presently devastating chronic diseases, including cancer. It's too much protein that causes so much trouble. Protein also always comes in combination with fat. Milk, cheese, chicken, eggs, fish, they're all high in fats. And protein and fats is a big problem. Now, what am I talking about when I'm talking about nutrients? Nutrients is not proteins and fat. Nutrients is minerals, enzymes, vitamins. Those are the true nutrients that the cells require to do their jobs. Of course, you need a tiny little bit of protein, probably 5 or 10% of what you're getting, maybe even less. And that's the major problem with the American diet, too much protein and fat. And you think you're doing a good thing, you're getting a nice steak, it's good nutrition. The steak is only about 19% assimilable protein. You're not getting much. Not only that, if you cook it, 2 of the major amino acids are damaged or destroyed, the L-lysine and the L-tryptophan. You're not even getting full proteins, but you're getting loads of fat that block your body. And now we get into other problems. When you look at fat, does the idea of diabetes ever come into your mind? No, diabetes has nothing to do with fat, right? Diabetes is a sugar metabolism disease. But age-onset diabetes is not. And this is most interesting, too. It has been studied and thoroughly studied, researched and found that in age-onset diabetics, perhaps 80% to 85% of these patients have perfectly adequate insulin in their bloodstream. But if they have insulin, how come they have diabetes? Well, the insulin in the bloodstream isn't doing you much good. The insulin has to go into the cell systems and combine with the sugars, burn the sugar. In other words, it's like having a beautiful wood in your fireplace and no match to light it, if you can't get the insulin into the cell system. But the cells have what is called insulin receptors. And those insulin receptors regularly, when you get diabetes, are clogged with cholesterol, fat. So age-onset diabetes is largely a disease of improper fat metabolism, too much cholesterol settling in the cell systems, not allowing the insulin to function. And that's happened, for instance, to Professor Albert Schweitzer, who was my father's patient for diabetes. He was 75. He had had diabetes several years. He had no energy, he was weak, he was tired, he was weary, and he didn't want to be like that. He didn't even want to live if he couldn't be effective and useful. He came to my father after he tried several of the top French diabetes specialists who had given him proteins. And he felt terrible. And he came to my father, and my father said, no proteins, no fats. And now, what is this Gerson therapy? What is this migraine therapy that works for TB? Vegetables, largely, freshly made juices, freshly prepared, nothing canned, jarred, pickled, preserved, salted, greasy, fried. Everything is fresh, organically grown, free of poisons, rich in the nutrients that the body needs. And then you're going to say, hey, how can you give a diabetic a lot of carrot juice and a lot of potatoes and vegetables and those things? Well, you can. That's not the problem. If you cut out the fats, very soon the diabetics can cut down the insulin within a week or two. Within 4 to 6 weeks, they're usually off insulin. Their own insulin works. The cholesterol blockages are gone, and they function. So did Albert Schweitzer. After 6 weeks or so, he went back to Africa. He was working, he was functioning, he was happy. And if you recall, he lived past the age of 90 and collected a Nobel Prize on the way. So who tells you that diabetes is incurable? Of course it's incurable with insulin. Insulin just keeps some of the material going in the bloodstream, but it doesn't get to the underlying problem. On the contrary, when your doctor tells you eat a lot of protein, you're likely to eat fish and chicken and cheese and eggs and milk, and you're getting the very fats that are causing your disease. And then come the next problems. Then comes the heart disease, because the cholesterol collects in the vessels, in the blood vessels. And then comes the gangrene, because it blocks the little small arteries in the toes and the feet. Then comes the chopping off of feet and legs. And then you go blind because it also blocks the retina, the blood vessels in the retina. And you never get well. You can keep alive with the insulin, but you don't get well because the very things that cause the disease are continued on. Now, I have seen this, and it happens regularly. There are always people who will tell you, oh, I don't want to change my lifestyle. I don't want to give up my milk. I love my milk. Please, you're welcome to continue your milk. You continue your own lifestyle. You will not get well. That's your business. You have the right to decide. But if you know there are better ways, and if you want to get well, then we want to be able to show you what can be done. And we want you mainly to understand that the underlying problem has to be solved. Not to get a little insulin into the system. That's not the underlying problem. The underlying problem is malfunction. Whether we now have a malfunction with insulin, or if we have a malfunction with the immune system, or if we have malfunction with the oxidizing system, doesn't really matter. Because after my father had all this worked out with TB, then accidentally one day he was called to a woman who said she had a high fever, she had gallbladder cancer, and she was dying. And she says, doctor, give me a dietary therapy that I can get well. I said, I've never treated cancer. I have no idea. I don't know what to do. Yes, you must do it. Look, it's written down here in this health book. And with your therapy, with your you can do it. So my father wrote down the vegetarian diet therapy that he used for migraine and TB, and the woman got well. And 2 other patients got well similarly. And he didn't really know what he had done. And he didn't know what the key was. And you see, when he was treating TB patients, usually after an initial period of about 6 or 8 weeks, he added to the TB patient diet some yolk of egg. Because it's very rich in nutrients, it's rich in minerals, and he found that it was doing them good. But if he did that to the cancer patient, invariably the cancer came back. You can't do that with a cancer patient. And it took him more years, number of years, before he understood that the patient with cancer cannot handle fat. And the yolk of egg is almost pure cholesterol, is fat. And a cancer patient cannot handle it. And there's another big mistake that Orthodox doctors make, aside from the Orthodox treatment. They say, oh, the patient has lost so much weight, we got to give him a rich diet, give him butter and ice cream and lots of eggs. And they're feeding the tumors, and the patients don't get the nutrients. The tumors grab it. Because at this point, when there is cancer tissue in the body, the cancer tissue is able to grab the improperly digested fats. The body can't digest it properly anymore. If it's partially digested, the fractions that the body can't use, that are not going into the cell systems, the tumors grab and thrive on it. One day a doctor asked me, you know, I see invariably that when we put patients on this hyperalimentation, their tumors blow up like crazy. So I explained it to him. And he said, is that what it is? You can't force these things. This is the simplistic response. The patient is losing weight, feed him fat foods. But the fat is the problem in the first place. Now, Dr. Gerson said, no, you can't do that. You've got to rebuild the body. You've got to give the body the nutrients. You've got to give it the vitamins, the minerals, the enzymes, so that all the functions can be restored. Not you block the body with fats and salt. And Dr. Gerson said, loss of potassium is the beginning of all chronic diseases. Because when you lose potassium from the cell system, sodium penetrates. And with the sodium, you get enzyme blockage. Now, why is enzyme blockage so dangerous? for all the things that go on in the human body. From the moment you breathe air. Air isn't pure oxygen. It's oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide. So how does that go into your bloodstream? How do your red blood cells get the oxygen? Well, it has to split off the oxygen. It has to go through the membranes of your lung tissue, the little alveoli, the air sacs. And then the red blood cells have to grab onto the oxygen. How is that all done? Well, the body does all this with enzymes. They are doing thousands of chemical functions. They are necessary for all these activities in the body. But you see, when sodium penetrates the cell systems, that suppresses enzymes. And this was only proven about 6 years after my father died. Two researchers, Dixon and Webb, published a book called Enzymes. What they did, they traced how the body was building certain enzymes, and there are hundreds, maybe thousands of enzymes in the body. They didn't trace them all, but a whole large number. And in almost every case, they found that in order for the body to build the enzymes from its nutrients, it required potassium. And in almost all cases, sodium or salt was the enzyme inhibitor. Now, enzyme inhibitor is also another definition or a term for toxin or poison. In other words, sodium, salt, when it penetrates the cells where it doesn't belong, is a poison, an enzyme inhibitor. Then the cell systems can no longer work properly, can no longer oxidize. Now, Otto Warburg came and showed that a normal healthy cell utilizes oxygen to combine with the hydrocarbons, the food, the digested food, to burn it, to create energy. He won the Nobel Prize twice. Now, the next thing he showed is when the body is incapable of providing this oxidation energy, the body goes into fermentative metabolism, a lower form of producing energy. And the only thing the cells can do with fermentative metabolism is grow and split and grow and split and grow and split, and that's cancer. So if you block enzymes at the cellular level, with toxins, with sodium, or other poisons for that matter, and you can name any ones you want. You can name the carcinogens in the air, you can name cigarette smoke, alcohol, you can name drugs. All drugs are eventually liver toxic. Whether you are talking about street drugs, or over-the-counter drugs, or doctor-prescribed drugs, there are no drugs that are safe for any length of time. They're all eventually liver toxic. Drugs will never heal anything. They'll suppress symptoms. They do not heal. Because, for instance, if you have arthritis, right? The doctors usually start by giving you a certain amount of aspirin. But arthritis does not develop as a result of aspirin deficiency in the body. Therefore, it doesn't heal. Okay? And you got to remember that. That's very important. Now, if the sodium and other toxins block enzymes, then it's the first thing you want to do is stop taking toxins in your body. And first thing Dr. Gerson always did for the patients, cut out all salt and cut out animal products. Now, I'd like to go into this a little bit. Most people are born and raised with the idea that meat gives you strength. Meat is good. Right? By the way, I was raised without meat. I still don't eat meat. I don't eat salt. And somebody once said, if you don't eat salt, if you don't eat enough salt, you can't stand up for 20 minutes. I can show you that I can stand up for all day. I've done all-day seminars standing up. Okay? You don't need salt. It's not true. Anyway, I'm the best proof. Meat is supposed to be giving you strength and health. It doesn't, and this is the reason. First of all, our bodies are not constructed as meat-eating animals. Meat-eating animals have different teeth. We don't have the teeth of meat-eating, we have grinding teeth of the vegetarian animals. We have the intestinal tract, the stomach acid of the vegetarian animal. Meat-eating animals have 7 times as much stomach acid as we do. Therefore, we cannot handle meat properly. It's not digested properly. We have the long intestinal tract of the vegetarian animal. The meat-eating animals have short intestinal tracts, so that the mass of putrefying meat, the dead tissue, goes quickly through the intestinal tract and doesn't cause problems. We have too long an intestinal tract to eat meat. In 1978, when the Senate Committee on Nutrition and Human Needs heard a whole group of researchers, some of them showed that the meat eaters in the American public versus the non-meat eaters, there are certain religious groups that, due to their religion, don't eat meat. The meat eaters have 10 times as much colon cancer because the meat, the putrefying meat, stays too long in the colon. It doesn't belong there. Now, you say, oh, but there's a lot of protein in meat. Well, first of all, when an animal whose body is designed to eat meat, when an animal kills, it eats the meat fresh. Usually eats the liver first so it gets the enzymes. Then it eats the fresh meat raw immediately. What do? We kill an animal and then we let the meat age because it's tough. Age also means putrefied. You know that when animals are dead, they go into rigor mortis, which means the muscle tissue changes, putrefies. It's damaged, it's no longer digestible. Now when it's properly, quote unquote, aged, now we bring it home, stick it in the fridge for another day or two, now we cook it. And then you tell me, yes, but it has all the amino acids, the full protein, but it doesn't. First of all, the proteins are putrefied. Secondly, in cooking you destroy the lysine and the L-tryptophan. So you get a mass of putrefied, damaged, highly fat-containing material, and you say that does you good. I say it doesn't. If you tell me it tastes good, I won't argue. We're not talking taste, okay? But if you tell me you need it, and it makes you feel good, and it gives you strength, I argue, You may know that Navratilova went to a special nutritionist in order to win. She even wrote a book, Eat to Win. And the nutritionist told her to cut out fats and meat and to eat complex carbohydrates, fresh vegetables, and unfortunately also said pasta, which is not the best thing in the world, but specifically told her not to eat meat and fat because the fats block energy production. And she won. Okay? Very important. A number of other athletes, Olympic athletes too, are vegetarian. You'll also know that certain meat-eating animals, you see movies, for instance, that live in the African veld and that chase their food down. A jaguar, a lion, a tiger, if they don't catch their prey within the first 40 seconds of the race, the vegetarian animals outrun them by hours. The lions and tigers and the meat-eating animals cannot keep up the pursuit. They have a burst of energy, that's all. They do not have sustained energy like the vegetarian animals that they're chasing to eat. It's very important. All right, so meat is not the answer. So where's the answer? The answer is in the fresh, live, organically grown, free from poison, vegetables, nutrients. But when a patient is very severely depleted, has advanced cancer, is in pain, you're not going to start feeding him vegetables. Dr. Gerson felt you have to very intensively restore these patients. You can't do it with just 3 meals. What did he develop? He developed juices. Now, the Gerson therapy was developed in such a way that the patients get a fresh glass of juice, 8-ounce glass of juice, every hour, plus 3 full vegetarian meals. Now, in order to make a glass of juice, it takes at least 1.25 pounds, something like that, of carrots and apples or the various greens. Remember, the carotene in there builds up the immune system. The fresh greens, you have the folic acid, you have the iron, you have also beta-carotene. You build up the blood, the immune system. You build up the body's defenses. And if you give a patient a glass of juice every hour, they can drink it. They can't eat all the food that goes into it. If you put together all the food that is made into the 13 juices, plus the 3 meals, plus the fruit plate we give each patient in their room every day, that's roughly 20 pounds of food a day. Now, no sick patient can eat that. But you can drink the juice and eat the vegetarian meals. And that way you can vastly multiply your intake. Now let me tell you what happens. We had a young woman, 38 years old, pancreas cancer with liver metastases. That's 2 deadly forms of cancer all wrapped up in that one little lady. She had lost 25 pounds from mid-August to mid-October when we saw her. Further, she was in terrible pain. She was taking 12 morphine tablets a day, and it didn't take the pain away. It just took the worst edge off it. She was still doubled up. So she came in, and she could barely eat. She nibbled a little with the pain. Now, in order to get the body to work, you also have to get the poisons out. You have to intensively detoxify. And my father developed the idea of coffee enemas. You've probably heard about them. They're quite well known by now. Famous, infamous, I don't care what you call them. It doesn't matter. But they had a very strange history, interesting. Way back in World War I, Germany was surrounded by the Allies, and they were not able to get all kinds of exotic things, including anesthesias and morphine and that sort of thing. When the soldiers were being wounded and shot to pieces, you know, the surgeons had to sew them up. They had just a tiny bit of morphine during the surgery, but then when they woke up, there was nothing to help. But there was always coffee for the surgeons, because they often had to work around the clock, 24, 36 hours. There were so many of these soldiers being brought in emergency. There was always coffee for the surgeons. But then the nurses, the patients woke up out of surgery and out of anesthesia, and they were in terrible pain. And in many cases, the surgeon had ordered enemas anyway for these soldiers. And the nurses, out of desperation, said, hey, this coffee is doing the surgeons good, we'll put some in the buckets. Try something. Not so stupid. They put coffee in the buckets for the enemas, for these soldiers that had just had surgery. And they said it was doing them good. The pain was going. And this was later researched after World War I, researched at the University of Göttingen in Germany. And 2 professors found that, in fact, yes, when you put caffeine into the rectum of animals, it travels to the portal system of the liver. And they could watch at the place of the liver and bile duct. It was opening these ducts, and the liver was able to let go of bile and accumulated toxins. So this young woman comes in on 12 tablets of morphine, emaciated, dying. Her doctor said she wouldn't see Christmas. And we start her with the juices. Potassium to get the sodium out of the system. Sodium is needed for tumor growth. Sodium, fat, and proteins, animal proteins. So we give her nothing but fresh vegetables, organic everything, juices. She's beginning to drink the juices. She's taking the enemas. She's getting some relief. In 72 hours, her pain was gone. She was off the morphine. 3 months later, after Christmas, when she was supposed to be dead, on the vegetarian, all vegetarian, non-fat, non-protein diet, she had regained her 25 pounds. She had celebrated Christmas with the family, and she was recovering. So don't please tell me you need meat. Meat is a killer. And that's only one patient. Then we see very interesting things. When, as Dr. Gerson called it, you reactivate the body's own healing mechanism. Mind you, the healing mechanism is not just the immune system. It's rebuilding tissue, it's breaking down sick tissue, it's getting everything straightened out again. If you break your leg, you have it set and you're reasonably healthy, it'll mend, it'll grow together. Or if you have a lump or a bump, you lance it, if it's an infection or so, the pus goes out and it'll go away and it'll heal if your healing mechanism is working. But once cancer develops, it isn't doing that. For instance, we had a patient, a young man of 51. He's still young for having prostate cancer. And he came to us, but along with his prostate cancer, he had 3 herniated discs in his spine. He was in constant pain, on total disability, because that was pressing on his sciatic nerve, and his left leg was useless, in pain. Also, his muscle, his thigh muscle, had gone down by 50% due to the pressure on the nerve. Plus, he had high blood pressure and was on medication for that. And he had some arthritis besides. But that's not what he came to us for. He came because of the cancer. The cancer was biopsied at the University of California in Santa Barbara by the top oncologist. After 2 years, he went back to the same oncologist, couldn't find any more cancer in his body. The arthritis was gone, high blood pressure was gone, normal, no more drugs. But the herniated discs had reformed, rebuilt. The destruction, the atrophy of his thigh muscle was almost completely overcome. It was almost exactly the same again as the other leg. He had no more pain. He was well. Now something funny happened. I had him demonstrated him at the podium one day, and it occurred to me, hey, you were on full disability. Now the x-ray showed the herniated discs were rebuilt and the leg is normal again. Did they take the disability payments away from you? He says, no, they wouldn't believe it. I say, wait a minute. Is this medicine or is it a religion? Believe it, you see the x-rays, you see the leg, the man is healed. No, it can't be, it cannot happen, it doesn't exist in medical history, therefore it didn't happen. So they're still paying him his disability. And he's fine, he's working, he's well. Okay? It doesn't exist when they can't do it. All right? But what I'm trying to show you now is then when you really reactivate the body's healing mechanism, you cannot selectively heal only cancer. And you keep your herniated discs and your arthritis and your high blood pressure and your other problem. If the body in fact heals, it heals everything. And I do say if. Why do I have to say if? There are a number of little problems. One of the problems is the patient. If the patient cheats and doesn't adhere to the therapy, it doesn't heal. Another problem is very severe liver damage. The liver is the essential organ in the body. The liver is the healing organ. All the medical and biochemical activity in the human body goes through the liver. If the liver works, you are well. If you are ill, the liver isn't doing its job. The liver isn't able to function. It's not the liver's fault, it's your fault for not giving it the right nutrients. It's not getting its vitamins, its minerals, its enzymes. It's being clogged with excess fat and protein. Excess fat and protein and toxic substances. Kids that are eating French fries and ice cream and cake instead of fresh fruit and vegetables and fresh salads and raw foods. Who needs kids with leukemia? It's a terrible thing. Unnecessary. It used to be that cancer was a disease of old age, middle and old age. Nowadays, cancer is the #1 killer of children under 17. It used to be a #1 killer disease because the #1 killer was accidents. That was only a few years ago. But now cancer has even exceeded accidents in children. Cancer is a degenerative disease, is when the body gives out. Why do children's bodies deteriorate to that point? That's horrible. Let me tell you what some Japanese researchers did. That was way back in the 30s. They painted the ears of rabbits with tars in order to produce cancer. And they were surprised that it took so long for the cancer to come up. So after 3 months they killed a group to see what was going on. None of them had any tumors yet. But there was some damage to the essential organs. Which are the essential organs? The kidneys, the spleen, the liver, the lungs, the brain, the heart, etc. Pancreas, of course. So they continued painting the ears of those rabbits. And after 6 months, they killed another group. And when they examined those, they had severe damage to these same essential organs. And still no tumor had developed. It took 8 to 9 months before the first tumors grew. And of course, there was extensive damage by then to all the essential organs. Now, if you now cut away the tumor or radiate it and burn it down, what have you done to restore the essential organs? Nothing. So is it a surprise that the cancer comes back? In the same place, in a new place, spreading somewhere? What difference does it make? The body is not healed. You're cutting away the tip of the iceberg. That's not enough. Nor is radiation going to heal. And the absolute worst of all things is chemotherapy. Chemotherapy, if you look it up in the physician's desk reference book, chemotherapy's side effects, among other things, is death, is kidney disease, is kidney failure, is liver failure, and heart failure. Chemotherapy is carcinogenic. What kind of a drug is that can cause you cancer? Well, they figure that it'll reduce your cancer for a while, maybe extend your life a few months. By the time it's carcinogenic, you would be dead anyway. What kind of a drug? What kind of healing is that? Dr. Gerson wrote a book called A Cancer Therapy, detailed the treatment exactly. And in order to show it and prove it, he published results of 50 cases, 50 terminally ill people that he published in the second part of the book, with x-rays and biopsy reports and so on. The book came out in 1958. In order for the patients to be in there, they had to be well at least 3 to 5 years, somewhere longer than that. And you can figure out quite easily that that's now 31 years later. Of those 50 patients, of course, many were too old to be surviving now. We've been able to trace a dozen still alive today after terminal cancer. Interestingly, 3 melanoma patients my father published, and they were all young enough, are still alive and well today. All with terminal metastasized melanoma. Now, very interesting. We had a lady who was a great friend of ours because she had helped her daughter's brain tumor. And she wanted to study alternative therapies, but before she was going to study that, she had friends at Sloan Kettering. She said, "Let me see your records first of melanoma patients," because they were the ones that suggested melanoma for study. We'll see, she said, we start with your files. And they looked at her a bit sheepishly and said, "Well, we don't have any. We throw away their files, they all die." The 3 cases my father treated as far back as 1945, 1947, 1952 are alive today. They were terminally ill with melanoma spreading in their bodies. We have outside, there's a book by Jackie Davis who had melanoma all over her body, biopsied, proven. 14.5 years ago, she is well. Many, many other melanoma patients. We have excellent results. One melanoma patient came to us, 71 years old. She had a big tumor on her shoulder in Los Angeles. She went nearby there, the City of Hope. Yeah, you know what I'm thinking. They cut it open and they tried to take it out, and they got the pathology report that it was melanoma, and they tried to go as deep as they could to get it all, and they couldn't. It was in the lung. So they closed her up, 71 years old, okay, closed her up, sent her home. Before the wound was even healed, the tumor was back as big as before, and meantime it had spread to the other side and was in the lung. 71 years old, now she comes to us. Along with her melanoma, spreading, terminal, she had cataracts. With and without glasses, she couldn't see. She couldn't watch TV, she couldn't read. She had high blood pressure, was on medication. She had arthritis all over her joints, everywhere. And she had severe hearing loss. I just talked to her the other day. She is now 80, going on 81. Her eyes are good, thank you. She watches TV, cataracts are gone, without surgery. Blood pressure is normal. Arthritis is mostly gone. Her hearing, she says her family says she hears more than she's supposed to. 10 years later, she was supposed to be dead long ago. That is where the Gerson therapy is not only healing the cancer. When the body truly heals, it heals everything. You can't keep any of your conditions. If you heal, everything heals. Okay? I have also out there, our latest newsletters just come out. I got the first printed copies in the office yesterday. Nutritional superiority of organically grown foods. Now that's proven. There are a lot of articles, all scientific, in the literature and so on, is part of this information. But I think you may be even more interested in a case study that we publish. Every so often in our newsletters we have case studies. Here's a young man. He was 31 years old when he first came to us. I don't know if you can see, this is his picture. He had had seizures, he had passed out. They took x-rays and they showed a large tumor in the brain. They opened him up and they took out whatever they could. They couldn't get it all. About half of it remained, the size of a good tomato. Furthermore, he was told there were roots like fingers into the rest of the brain, and they couldn't get it. They gave him a little radiation. They told him that would prolong his life. He could live maybe 3 months. At 31, he has young children. 3 months with the radiation. The wife said, all right, let's go to Florida and have fun, and then that's it. He says, no, I want to see whether I can't find some help. But the wife had a brother who was an MD. And the brother said, it's quackery, it's a rip-off, all they want is money, and so on. Don't go to Mexico. He went to Mexico, came to our clinic, went on the therapy. It was a tough pull. The wife didn't raise a finger. The mother put him on the therapy, made all the food and juices. It's now 3.5 years later, and I invite you to look at the magnetic resonance imaging pictures. You can see the tumor here. You can see it slowly disappearing. The last x-ray he brought in April, 3 years after he was supposed to be dead. X-ray's clean. Brain is clear. He is functioning, he is well. Unheard of. Absolutely doesn't exist with orthodox medicine. Now what does the brother-in-law say? Would you believe this? He says, but he'll die, he'll still die. Well, of course we all die. They can't admit it, they can't stand it, they can't believe it. It wipes out everything they've ever learned and studied. They fight it tooth and nail. They can't believe it. They don't want to see it. But here it is. Meantime, we heal people. The other day we had a man who came in, a large tumor on his jaw. It was a squamous cell. It had invaded the jaw, the lymph nodes, the ear. He was in severe pain, had lost the hearing there. Plus, he had had 2 severe heart attacks, and his cardiologist said he had only 15% of his heart muscle left. He had to get up every night 3 and 4 times to take a nitroglycerin to even sleep through the night, to be able to live through the night. He came to us because of the cancer. He was with us 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, he never had to get up once to take nitroglycerin at night. He functioned. The heart, what little was left, functioned. At the end of 2 weeks, the tumor was down by half. The remaining tumor tissue was soft. The pain was much improved. Hearing was coming back. Healing. Whether it's cancer or heart disease or diabetes or arthritis, ulcerative colitis, if the body is restored and all systems function again, if the mineral balance, the hormone system, the enzyme system, everything is back in balance, the body works. Again, with the possible exception of 2 severe advanced liver damage. If the liver is gone, it's gone. When it's full of cancer, and there has to be some tissue left. If there is not enough tissue left, you have nothing to work with, you can't restore. And one major problem is too much chemotherapy. Disease you can overcome. The doctor-caused poisoning of chemotherapy is a different story. In some cancers, it's not as serious. With breast cancers, it's not as serious. Lymphoma is not as bad. But if you have liver cancer, pancreas cancer, and such that are severely damaging to the organ systems, if you now take poison on top of it, now you're in a different ballpark. Then the help we can provide is less effective. Now, of course, we use not just the Gerson therapy. It's the key. The detoxifying is the key to getting the nutrients back into the cells. If the cells are clogged with poison, what are you going to do with nutrients? They won't go in. But when you do the enemas and you open the bile ducts and the toxins can be flushed out of the system, suddenly the nutrients go in and healing begins. And pain goes away. We've had a patient who came in with bladder cancer, was bleeding. In 2 days, the bleeding stopped. But, he said, he had had 30 years of migraine headaches. From the first enema he took at the hospital, headaches were gone. No more drugs, painkillers, nothing. No more migraine headaches. Once the patients find out the enemas take care of the pain, I tell you, you don't have to sell them anything. They do it all on their own because they get all the relief. All right? Healing. Getting to the underlying problem. Getting rid of toxins and restoring with nutrients, live, active nutrients, no poisons. That's the way to do it. And it works. And we see the people recover. Now I'm going to give you a few minutes, rest and stretch, and we'll give our friend back there with his camera a moment to change his tape. And then I'd like you to come back, and I'll be very happy to answer questions. And if you have no question, I can tell you a lot more stories. Okay. One of the most terrible phrases in the English language is recreational drugs. There's nothing recreational about drugs. Aside from being illegal and criminal, they do terrible things. It's bad enough when doctors give you drugs. Valium and antidepressants are some of the worst drugs there are. It is the easiest thing in the world to overcome depression. A couple of glasses of juice, a couple of enemas, depressions are gone. Instead of taking these horrible drugs that make the most awful side effects. And you're hooked. You can't ever stop it. They're addictive. Don't kid yourself. The 2 heroin addicts that came to us, the 3, one was also suffering from liver cirrhosis. The doctor told her if she didn't quit, she would not be surviving more than 2 months. Her belly was full of fluid, her liver was shriveled. She was also, aside from being a heroin addict, a very heavy smoker, and she was nervous as a kitten. And she knew she came to us to try to survive, and she knew she had to stop taking the heroin. And she didn't see how she could do it, or stop smoking. Whether it was this woman or a young man of 31 who had been 14 years on heroin, or a cocaine addict who said all his friends were dead. He was 32. All his friends had died. His lungs were filling up, and he said, I don't have much more than 2 months if I can't quit. On the Gerson therapy, when you give these people a fresh glass of juice every hour, all craving disappears. Because these juices contain the substances, the nutrients that the body, in fact, is craving. And when you get these nutrients into the system, as always, the poisons start pouring out, and they make these terrible side effects. And when you stop taking the drugs, the body releases the toxins, and the kids suffer, and they have these awful withdrawal symptoms. You give them an enema, the withdrawal symptoms disappear. So you do an enema every 3 or 4 hours, a glass of juice every hour, regular meals, no withdrawal symptoms. You have these people off drugs in 2 days, 3 days, without withdrawal problems. The only problem that the heroin addict, the young man, had was he had a little trouble falling asleep for the first few nights. He didn't sleep till after midnight. Big deal. It is very easy. If anybody wants to set up a withdrawal clinic, a drug dry-out clinic with a Gerson therapy, it's a snap. Very simple, very easy. Imagine what we could do for people if it were possible to do this in the U.S., if the doctors were not fighting this tooth and nail. One of the articles I have out there was appearing in New Age magazine. It was written by a woman who was preparing a study for the OTA, the Office of Technology Assessment of the U.S. Congress, was supposedly studying alternative therapies. Brzezinski, the Gerson therapy, the Livingston, and I think one other one was being studied. And it was, in order to be, give it a full writing, one of the top historical medical writers, Elizabeth Spain Ward, wrote an article on the Gerson therapy. They didn't like it because it was positive. They didn't want a positive article. They wanted a negative. Never mind the truth. We're not talking truth, right? So they're dragging their feet. But an interesting item in that article, I think, will explain the whole reason for all this foot dragging. Cancer today is an $80 billion a year industry. 80 billion. And you will hear people in the industry saying more people live off cancer than die of it, so let's continue it. Right? And 500,000 Americans die each year of cancer. And over 900,000 are diagnosed fresh each year with cancer. It's a horrible disease, and the medical profession is very comfortable with it because it's a huge income. It's very difficult to do this in the United States, and I'm preventing the question, why are we in Mexico? Most of the states, including, for instance, California, have a law that says any physician who uses anything but radiation, surgery, or chemotherapy in the treatment of cancer is a felon, loses his license, goes to jail, and pays a $10,000 fine. Now, a doctor can't risk that. He loses his livelihood. I say that when many of these patients who have already been treated with radiation surgery and chemotherapy, and the cancer keeps recurring and getting worse, and these people are dying, now the law says you can't use anything except what has already been proven to be failures. Then now the law, the state, goes in and says this patient must die. We can't even try anything new. And to me, that is unconstitutional. And if any lawyer he would like to fight it, I'd like to take it up. Okay, now, do you have some questions?
I've been working with an immune deficient condition like candida and long periods of exhaustion. And as I've been diagnosed by other people, they've told me that what I need to do is rebuild my energy right now, and that
How do they figure that?
through supplements and eating well.
All right, this problem is so common, The problem this young man is mentioning is candida and weakness and tiredness and so on, and he is being told to rebuild his energy. Okay, it's not that simple. First of all, candida usually is a result of treatment with antibiotics. So already you have a weak immune system. And the candida, of course, comes as a result of antibiotics because it knocks out all the competition. So the candida has a free field. And because you already have a weak immune system or you wouldn't be getting antibiotics, now the candida can step in. Usually also with it goes mononucleosis, Epstein-Barr, they call it the chronic fatigue syndrome. Taking supplements isn't going to do the trick. You've got to build up your immune system, and the supplements don't do it. Why didn't they do it in the first place? Why didn't they give it to you in the first place?
Well, she said that the supplements would balance out my chemistry so that the immune system would then take over, and that my particular body system wouldn't work really well to detox now because that would be a big strain on my system. And that I should
I'm sorry.
balance the chemistry first and then detox later when I'm stronger.
I don't know. I suppose you heard this. Detoxing is supposed to come after you're stronger. Trouble is, if you don't detox now, the nutrients and the vitamins and minerals are not going to go into the system because it's so toxic. It's like two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. If you don't get rid of the toxins, you're not going to get in the nutrients. And that's one of the worst things I've heard. It's like saying, let's say, of course, in this place you can't do that, but let's say you buy a piece of property, a piece of real estate, and you find out it's swampy, there's a lot of water. Now you build a house and then you dry the land? Or do you dry the land first and then you build a house? It doesn't make sense. Okay? Unfortunately, a lot of nutritionists and a lot of even people who have at least a certain understanding, we have seen, do not understand healing. We have had, unfortunately, at least half a dozen nutritionists as patients at the clinic, seriously ill, crippled arthritis. Would you go to a nutritionist that looks like this? And with very severe diabetic problems, a lesion that wouldn't heal, that on the Gerson therapy healed in 2 weeks after 2.5 years of being open and oozy. Nutritionists that can't help themselves, what are they going to tell you? We've had nutritionists with advanced cancer. It's unfortunate that nutritionists nowadays have to be licensed only by the medical profession. What do you think they're learning?
Well, I was considering going on the moderate diet, where you do it modified diet.
That you can do. Going on a modified diet will, of course, put you on the right track, and not so much with all the supplements, but mostly with the right nutrients and detoxifying. Without detoxifying, you get nowhere.
Right, and I was wondering if I did that, is it beneficial to continue the supplements that I was
Yes, you can take, you might as well. I think you can try the supplements eventually. They'll enter. You see, the problem is when your body is highly toxic, especially also with candida, the supplements don't go into the cell systems. You can stick them in your mouth. They go right through you, and they won't do you any good. We've seen that in patients. So until and unless you can metabolize the supplements, they don't do you any good. But the beauty is that you can always metabolize the fresh juices. They don't have to, depend on, they are not foreign substances. They are live, fresh, active nutrients. Okay, and if you then detoxify, then you can get it into your system. Okay, we have another question.
Related question: what if your body does not absorb nutrients well? I have a problem where no matter what I do, I can't seem to get the nutrients.
Well, what if your body doesn't absorb nutrients? Well, why isn't it? Then you have to get to the underlying problem. There's very simple. There's only two possibilities: toxicity and deficiency. Now, toxicity, toxins are enzyme inhibitors. The only way you can't absorb nutrients is, first of all, if you take them in the wrong form or shape, if you take canned, jarred, pickled, preserved foods, and if you take fresh, live substances and you don't metabolize them, then you don't have the enzymes to do it. Enzymes are only blocked by toxins. So if your body is toxic, same as in this situation, you're not going to metabolize. You need the enzyme function, and it won't happen until you get the toxins out of your system. Okay? Yes?
Somebody that's done a lot of cleansing for a long period of time, has been on pretty much vegetable, has been on a full vegetarian diet, let's say 9 years, done tons of wheatgrass, organic vegetables, lots of juices, has detoxed the liver, followed the program, let's say for 6 weeks, 2 coffee enemas a day, anywhere between 5 and 8 glasses. If you give me a program of what we've been doing, how long do you continue on detoxing? For someone like Oman, I know he's detoxifying his body to a certain degree and you go to a new level. But how do you know when, I mean, I'm feeling better than I've ever felt before, and I will.
Okay. The question is not an easy one, but I think it's not too difficult to answer. After you've done all these things and you have detoxified your body and you've eaten the right foods, how do you know when you're detoxified? How long do you keep on going, right? Well, there are two answers to that. First of all, you can't really do harm with a coffee enema, even if you are not toxic. In the worst case, it doesn't do you any harm. If it doesn't detoxify, at least it cleanses out the intestinal tract, no problem. Okay? And the second thing is, if you're feeling very good now, you have good energy, your body is functioning well, chances are you're getting there. Now the question is, are you only feeling well because you are creating the optimum conditions for your body? Or if your body is left more or less on its own devices with good, decent food, is it functioning at optimum level? And that comes now back to the patient. Let me digress a little bit. With the Gerson therapy, Dr. Gerson always said, getting rid of the tumor is only the beginning, is not healing. When the patients come to us and within 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, sometimes 6 or 8 weeks, their tumors are gone, they are not healed. They are now able to overcome the tumor tissue under optimum conditions which we create. The minute they stop those conditions, if they stop the juices, stop the enzymes, stop the supplements with potassium, and stop the enemas, the cancer will come right back. Okay? So now comes the question, are you now feeling really good because you are well and all your body systems are rebuilt? Or are you just reaching the top because you're doing all the right things? Now, with a cancer patient, Dr. Gerson said it takes 1.5 to 2 years on this intensive therapy with the juices, 13 glasses of juice a day, fresh every hour, and after, in the beginning, the first few weeks, 5 enemas a day, and after a few months, 4 enemas a day, and then 3, and then 2 after a year. You can do with 1. You're much, much less toxic. But you've got to rebuild the damaged organ systems or you haven't healed. And the cancer would come back. And what I was showing in the book, my father's patients are alive today. It's because their bodies are healed, the liver's restored, the organ systems restored, the enzyme systems working. Assimilation is total and complete, and they're able to detoxify even without enemas and juices. Okay? So now I don't know at what point you are, and I can't guess. Try it out.
Okay, how about the question then, like when do you know to eliminate the potassium out of, like if you're doing all the organic fresh juices, you still need to take the potassium if you're not taking medication? And also,
Well,
I want to ask one more thing because I know other people want to ask questions. I also was starting to feel stimulation of the potassium in the body.
Well,
They definitely have been taking coffee and know the caffeine is in their body.
okay. The question, first of all, concerns how long do you continue taking potassium, and second, how long do you continue taking the coffee enemas. You can become, to some minor extent, addicted to them. It does give you a little bit of a caffeine stimulation. Okay, let me answer the first question first, because again, they're connected. Nothing in this therapy is a specific department chapter all by itself. That's one of the most important things one has to learn, is that the human body is a biochemical whole. And you can't push a button here without upsetting something there. You got to work with all the systems, okay? Now, the potassium is so tremendously important because it's an enzyme activator. And another thing about potassium is this. In nature, potassium is extremely plentiful. The fruits are very rich in potassium. Vegetables, all the fresh things are high in potassium. And nature assumes that we are getting not only our need of potassium, but probably extra. So that the body, every person, has an excellent system in getting rid of any excess potassium. So you don't really have to worry about getting too much. I have taken potassium supplements about 2 tablespoons a day for, I hate to tell you, maybe 40, 45, maybe 50 years. Okay? There is no danger in taking potassium as long as you like. Only danger is not getting enough. Okay? Now, of course, you don't want to take a quart a day either. I mean, there is such a thing as exaggerating. But 2, 3 tablespoons a day is not a problem. Okay, now, if your body has adequate potassium, then the coffee enemas, the caffeine, isn't going to bother you. So if it bothers you, I'm still suspecting that you are not yet well and you don't have enough potassium, because Dr. Gerson says once there's enough potassium in the system, all hyperallergies and hypersensitivities disappear. Okay? Okay. Now, also after 2, 3, 4 months, you say 9 years, I don't know how long and how many coffee enemas you do. I would not suggest after 9 years to take 5 enemas a day. Absolutely not. Okay? I mean, there is limits. Also, you want to be very careful. If you do coffee enemas a day, you want to make sure that if you drink at least 3 juices, no problem, you can take an enema. If you take more juices, 4, 5, 6 juices, you can take 2 a day. If you take 5 enemas a day, you better be getting at least 10 juices. Because if you don't get adequate juices, now you get electrolyte imbalance. Okay? That's why I keep saying the body is always a total biochemical whole. Don't push a little here, shove a little there, and dislocate something here. It doesn't go. You've got to always remember that all systems must be in balance. Very important. And that's basically the Gerson therapy. All systems are be returned to balance. Okay? Let's get somebody back there. I'm not a doctor. Not true. Of course. Okay. Okay, let me just answer this first. We happen to have right here a gentleman who came to our clinic some time ago. He had heart problems, heart attacks, this disease, that disease, all kinds of problems. And while I think if he would... Come on, stand up a moment, Ralph, come on. Come on. If he were to tell you he's 60 years old, you'd believe it, right? He looks great, looks marvelous. If he tells you he'll be 80 in January, you might not believe it, but that's the truth. Okay? But he's had a lot of heart problems and a lot of other problems. And of course he doesn't get the same thyroid and supplements that we would give other patients. And with certain other problems, perhaps he gets a half a juice instead of the full glass of juice if he can't handle it. He gets it tailored to him also with the potassium. He cannot handle 40 teaspoons of potassium a day as a cancer patient would. Of course it is tailored. However, let me say now, some other patient comes to us, say, with arthritis, and they're in pretty decent shape. And every patient pays basically the same fee. Now, why should we give that patient only 8 juices when they can easily handle 13? They're paying for it. They'd like to have the full complement of the therapy. Why should we give them less? Would it be fair? However, if on the other hand we have a patient, and we have that often, who has ascites, belly is full of fluid, they can't drink 13 juices, impossible. Until we get the potassium in and get rid of the fluid and so on, we slowly have to adjust. They can't do a full quart enema. Of course it's adjusted. But if a person comes in even in fairly decent, average, good health, when anybody tells me they are perfectly healthy, I don't believe it. Okay? I always say anybody over the age of 2 is not perfectly healthy. Okay? All right. So if anybody comes in pretty decent health and say, I just want to learn prevention, why shouldn't we give them 13 juices? No, 5 at most. We start with no more than 5. If they detoxify very intensively and absorb tumor masses intensively, then we do more. Let me give you an example. We had a lady who came to us, she had melanoma, and we have wonderful results always with melanoma. She had a tumor mass on the top of her arm. She had all black tumors under her arm. She had a large goose egg under her axilla, and she was coughing and spitting up blood. It was in her lungs, and had a lot of pain, and looked gray, yellow-gray, okay? Very seriously ill. Started her on the therapy, and within 2 days the pain was gone. 4 or 5 days the cough was gone. After 8 days, this broke up into little pieces, and the tumor under her arm was half its size. It was amazing. It just melted away. After 3 weeks, she went home. She was a whole different person. Half of the tumors were gone. The lungs were clear. Coughing had stopped. And she carried on the therapy. Now, very regularly, we see a very heavy healing reaction at about 6 weeks into the treatment, okay? Now, we always start the patients on 5 enemas a day. This patient, I hear from the son, at 6 weeks he calls up and says, you know, last night my mom was walking around the house and she was always repeating herself, talking nonsense. So we put her to bed, and this morning she didn't really wake up properly. She was sort of semi-comatose. So we took her in the hospital. And the doctor is saying that, of course, the tumor, the melanoma spread to the brain, she's dying. What should we do? Now, what did I say? I said, get her out of the hospital, not this afternoon, right now. Okay? Take her home and give her coffee enemas every 2 hours around the clock, day and night, 24 hours. In other words, 12 enemas a day. And I said, call me back in 24 hours. 24 hours, she was fine. Melanoma was not in the brain. What happened? She was absorbing the tumor masses rapidly, so rapidly that the toxins were hitting her brain. They were circulating in the body. The blood doesn't stop here. They circulated, hit the brain, and she started to go, strange. So what did they do? They put her to bed instead of detoxifying her. Okay? Had they done that in the evening, nothing would have happened. But now they put her to bed, so all night she continued to accumulate toxins, and by morning she was in a semi-coma. Okay? Now, had they then started the enema, she would have been all right too. But once she's in the hospital, then the doctor's prognosis is self-fulfilling, okay? All right. What I'm saying is this. We always start with 5 enemas. With intensive detoxifying and very rapid tumor absorption, we step up the enemas. Otherwise, not needed. With severe pain, you step up the enemas, the pain goes away. The patients do it all themselves, okay? Now, when you have a patient who's not very seriously ill, not very toxic, but you give them 13 juices a day, you better give them 5 enemas. Okay? Now, if you give him only 5 or 6 juices, he'll do with 2, if he's not really ill. Okay? But if they come to us and they want to have the best possible treatment and effectiveness, why not give them the full therapy? Of course we tailor it to each patient. Next question.
There was another part to that. We all realize that we are psyche and soma,
Mhm.
and a lot of conditions that are created and are called disease are the result also of the mental emotional set of that
Mhm.
person. Is this addressed at all, or do you suggest a person deal some way with this
I have a very interesting answer to that. It deals not only with emotional problems, but with stress and everything, emotional and other stress. And I'd like to bring that up, because there might be the question anyway. There is absolutely no question that stress causes chemical changes in the body. It causes adrenaline to secrete, it causes additional sugars, etc. There are changes in the body, and the adrenaline can be quite toxic. A normal, healthy liver neutralizes those toxins, gets rid of it, and no problem. Therefore, stress doesn't do any harm to a normal, functioning human being. When they now tell you stress causes disease, it's the other way around. Only a damaged, diseased liver, which is already no longer capable of detoxifying the body, only that kind of liver will not do the job, and then the stress adds, of course, to the disease. But you've got to have the disease first. Then the stress causes new problems. Another problem with stress, let's say heavy work, overwork, you don't take time to eat properly. You have a hamburger or a frankfurter, or you take a snack, or you drink coffee and a cookie or something instead of eating a normal meal. That causes disease. Okay? But stress by itself does not. Now, we have the proof. For instance, a young woman, 32, had cancer originally in the eye was removed. She had a very bad marriage, and she said she wanted to do the Gerson therapy. The husband said, do whatever you want. Yeah. Certainly not a nice marriage, certainly not a good husband. There were a lot of problems at home, okay? And she had other stress situations. All right, she did the therapy, and she got well. Stress or no. Had nothing to do with the stress. The moment she started the therapy and the pain was gone, emotionally, she was better. Immediately, she felt confident. She felt, aha, this is positive. She had been diagnosed with metastases to the lung, biopsied. And the doctors told her there was nothing they could do. She had a few months to live. And she was in severe pain. The minute the pain was gone, she was a whole new person, because she could see herself healing. And all the stress from the family made no difference at all. Okay? Now, there's no doubt that we are emotionally and spiritually also units. I keep saying we are biochemical units. We are also spiritual and emotional units. We regularly see patients coming in, they're tight and they're tense and there's fear and panic in their eyes. They know they have severe cancer, they're dying. Within a day, when they see others improving, when they see their pain going away, when they see, that this is working, and when they detoxify themselves, within days, these people look different. They act different. Now, I encourage people when they come. I make rounds. I see every person twice a week. And I encourage them and help them. But there's very little psychological help needed when they see themselves and their neighbors getting better. That does the trick. Plus, if you do detoxify, depressions go away. We tell the patients that if you are, and my father points out in the book, doing healing reactions when the body is very toxic, patients are depressed. If you do the enemas, the depressions go away. The same patient who had the problem in the eye and then in the lungs, she had 2 young children. The boy was 7, the girl a little older. She said when she was toxic like this, she would lie in bed and plan on how she could beat up the kids. She was a good mother. She was perfectly nice. she would take an enema and her brain would clear. Okay? Now, she couldn't have a psychiatrist come several times a day and counsel her, and it wouldn't have worked. When the body and the brain is toxic, it doesn't work. When you have a starving man who was caught in the desert for 3 days and didn't have food or water, you're going to counsel him, or you're going to give him food and water? Okay? You've got to address the immediate problem. Stress is in every life, and a normal, healthy body handles stress. So you've got to restore the liver, detoxify the liver, and the stress is handled. Okay? Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Let's be a little bit careful here. The question is, what do the 4 enemas and detoxifying, what effect do they have on restoring lung tissue and emphysema? Enemas have never healed lung tissue. You cannot heal by detoxifying alone. Just like I was talking about, if you buy a swampy piece of land and you got all the fluid, the water, and all the dirt and the junk out, now you have a nice piece of land, you still don't have a house. Detoxifying does not rebuild. Detoxifying is only half of the equation. Unless you rebuild with the right nutrients, with intensive nutrition, with the proper juices, with the right food, free of poisons, without salt, without meat, you're not going to rebuild a thing. Because detoxifying is very nice, but it's not enough. Now, if you then add the proper nutrients and get that, you can rebuild the lung tissue to an extent. Now, the liver is an organ that's fully restorable. You can cut off a piece and it'll regrow. There's no other organ in the body that will do that. The lung tissue, what's dead is dead. What's diseased can be restored. Okay, the same goes for the kidneys, for instance. What's dead is gone. Okay? So it depends a little bit. If you dare very intensively, not just detoxify, it's not enough. If you intensively rebuild, you can restore much of the diseased lung tissue. You can improve your circulation because you get rid of the atherosclerosis and all the cholesterol gets dissolved out of your system so that you improve what lung tissue you have works better because your circulation is better and your arteries are improved. But enemas alone won't do the job. It's half a job. Okay. Yes, indeed. The question is, why do we talk about organically grown fruits and vegetables when the Gerson therapy was effective way before there were organically grown fruits and vegetables? That's just the point. Back in 1943, they only started to use DDT. Before that, there was no DDT. Everything was more or less organic. Okay, they used artificial fertilizer, but there my father already insisted on using properly fertilized vegetables. But DDT only came in during World War II. And the bug sprays and the other poisons only came in much later. And he describes in the book how he observed that his results were getting less and less. And that he had to add, for instance, liver juice and other things to help the liver get rid of these accumulations of highly toxic insect sprays. Okay, but way before that, there were no toxins. Okay? Now, let's see somebody from over here. Yes? Can I say something about parasites? I'm scared to death of parasites. Very, very difficult. Much more difficult to deal with than germs and viruses and cancer and anything else. Very difficult to deal with, especially once they've gone out of the intestinal tract and into the bloodstream. Very hard to deal with. I don't know what to do. Scared to death. I don't know. I'm sorry. Okay. Hypoglycemia and hyperglycemia is really the same thing. There are very high swings in both directions, meaning that the body systems that control the sugar level in the blood, which is very, very carefully controlled between the pancreas, the insulin, and the adrenals, those systems aren't working right. Now, Dr. Broda Barnes had made a study of hypoglycemia, and he found regularly that a little bit of thyroid took care of it. Now, we have a lot of problems because our bodies are so damaged by chlorine. Why is chlorine so dangerous? Chlorine is everywhere. It's in our water, our drinking water. It's in our cleansers, in our bleachers, and so on. Chlorine displaces iodine from the thyroid and thereby damages the thyroid, and that's one of the major problems in cancer and hypoglycemia and heart disease, you name it. The thyroid is a tremendously powerful and important organ, and it is damaged by so many attacks on it, namely chlorine and fluorine. And when your thyroid can be restored, and this is one of the things we work with very seriously, when the thyroid can be restored and reactivated, you get rid of the hypoglycemia. Also on the Gerson therapy, when you drink a glass of juice every hour, there's no chance for these wide swings. You keep supplying the body with the nutrients, and hypoglycemia disappears very quickly. Okay, wait a minute. Any more on this side? We've had, yes.
In theory, I believe the vegetarian diet is the perfect diet. But I'd like to understand, why do a lot of naturopaths say that you have to have a certain amount of meat or fish in your system to get certain amino acids? How can you get those?
All right. Why? Well, while vegetarian diet is probably a perfect diet, why do nutritionists and so on say that you need the amino acids? I addressed that question already. I already explained that in meats you do not get the essential amino acids. They're putrefied and heat damaged by cooking. And it's an illusion. They're wrong. I was raised without meat, and I still eat no meat, and I'm not deficient. I work 6-7 days a week. I do not wear glasses. I'm 67 years old. I can read without glasses. I passed my driver's license without glasses. My hearing is good. And 2.5 years ago, I fell. I broke my ankle in 3 places, okay? And you know emergency rooms? Well, I was in the emergency room in pain with my ankle swollen and without food, and I was miserable, and I waited 3.5 hours. And I was angry, and they took my blood pressure 120/80. Okay? So when people tell you that you have to have meat for your amino acids, I'm sorry, they're wrong. And all the amino acids I can get is a little bit of defatted yogurt and a little bit of defatted skim milk cottage cheese I make myself from raw skim milk without salt and fat. Okay, and I have maybe 4 or 5 ounces of that a day, and maybe a jar of yogurt a day, 8 ounces of yogurt, and that's all the amino acids you need. I assure you, because I work 6-7 days a week. This is now the 2nd weekend in a row I'm working without interruption, without rest. Yes.
What about cooked foods such as grains, rice?
Grains and rice are a little bit shaky. They're all right for healthy people, but you always have to be a little bit careful, because grains particularly, also legumes and nuts, are nature's way to preserve life for the next generation. And grains and legumes are endowed by nature with an enzyme inhibitor, so that they don't just wildly sprout any place they happen to sit. Let's say they're on a tabletop. They're not going to sprout. They have an enzyme inhibitor. Because if they were to sprout, they'll be lost. There's no food there, right? Okay. You've heard jokes about sailors that eat beans. What happens? They get gas. Right? Why gas? There are enzyme inhibitors in beans. So the digestion doesn't work very well. So unless you're healthy, you don't want to eat much of that stuff. You don't want to give it to patients because it inhibits digestion. And the amino acids that are in there are imbalanced. In nuts particularly. You see, again, your nutritionists tell you, okay, you're vegetarian, you better eat a lot of nuts and grains. Well, that's wrong. Dr. Gerson prohibited nuts. Nuts are very high in L-arginine. They also contain proteins. I don't say they don't, but they're not balanced. They're too high in L-arginine, low in L-lysine, but you need the L-lysine for your immune system. The L-arginine swamps it out and they weaken your immune system. Besides, they're hard to digest. So nuts and grains are not so good.
Now, during the winter, when you can't always get good fresh fruits and vegetables, what about things like dried fruits?
Okay, the question is during the winter, what do you do for fruits? Okay, drying fruits and vegetables, if you must preserve them, is the best way, the least damaging. Okay, so why not? Go ahead. Canning them, putting them up is not so good. They're killed, they're dead. Okay, and that is the way to go, but you still can find, of course, you can ship in your fruits and vegetables, and we're very fortunate in California. Year-round we get fresh fruits and vegetables. And I urgently suggest, if they're not available locally, get them brought in. You need them. Okay? Yes?
How about soybeans?
Soybeans, Dr. Gerson prohibited all soy products. Same problem. Imbalanced proteins and too much fat. Tofu and all that. Tofu, no. Okay, now let's see. We have, all right.
First, I want to come back to the bean issue a little bit.
Yeah.
Situations like the Hippocrates Institute, is it the sprouted beans, all these things sprouted, essentially supposed to break down those proteins, which are essential amino acids, make it readily assimilar for the body, break down the enzymes.
I know.
Are they healthy? Are they good?
Okay, the question is, what if we can't eat beans and nuts? What about sprouts? I've had quite an argument just yesterday about sprouts, and specifically alfalfa sprouts. We had 2 patients one time, longer-term patients, who decided that sprouts was the best food there is, and Hippocrates pushes it and it's supposed to be the best. And it's fresh and live, okay? And they both, one was a cancer patient, one was a lupus patient, but the lupus had long disappeared on the Gerson therapy. Many, many months, 10, 11 months without lupus. Both of them got very severely ill. The cancer patient eventually died. The lupus patient got a whole new outbreak of lupus with all the sprouts. It turned out, and that research only came out about 2 years later, it turned out that in animals, in monkeys, sprouts of alfalfa, now I don't know about the other sprouts, alfalfa sprouts can cause lupus. Alfalfa sprouts have a precursor protein fraction, which is not one of the regular amino acids. It's a precursor called L-canavanine, which is toxic. When we stopped all sprouts, our results were better. We stopped all sprouts. We don't know about the other sprouts. I'm only talking of knowledge only of alfalfa sprouts. That we know is wrong. I'm not sure about the other sprouts, but because we were not sure, we cut them out. And we do better.
Okay. Another question, sodium chloride, I know.
Sodium chloride is poison, is poison, is poison. And what about the other sodium? Well, what about baking powder? Sodium bicarbonate. The moment you come with any word with sodium, it's wrong. Okay, now what about the other cell salts?
Potassium chloride is used as a salt substitute.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be a balance.
Potassium chloride is supposed to be balanced and a salt substitute, and it's bad. The chloride radical is bad. Is almost as bad as the sodium. Besides, potassium chloride, sometimes if it's given in pill form, it attaches to the lining of the small intestine and eats right through it. Don't ever take potassium chloride tablet supplements, ever. It's very dangerous. I've known of a number of cases that have perforated small intestines on account of it. Dr. Gerson gave the form potassium. It is a combination, a 10% solution of 3 potassium salts in equal amounts It's in the book. It's potassium gluconate, potassium acetate, and potassium phosphate monobasic. 33 grams each makes 100 grams, 99. And you dissolve it in a quart of distilled water to make a 10% solution. And that is a very fine combination and works beautifully.
Excuse me again. How about Dr. Don's hydrogen peroxide and also then with more wheatgrass juice?
All right, the question is, what about the hydrogen peroxide and wheatgrass juice? All right. Hydrogen peroxide is excellent. Ozone is excellent. We use it both. The O radical, the free O, attacks tumor tissue, raises oxygenation in the blood. It's the best antibiotics. It kills germs, viruses. It's marvelous material. It's also a free radical scavenger. We use it all we can. It's excellent. Wheatgrass juice is a little bit different. Wheatgrass juice is very harsh. It's difficult to drink. If it's used as an implant, it can really irritate the colon if you do too much of it. You can throw a little wheatgrass in the green juice. We've done that. But we otherwise are very cautious with wheatgrass. We've seen a lot of trouble. Yes, again. What would my typical dinner be? Well, it's of course in the book. I eat according to the book. A typical dinner is a great big bowl of fresh salad, all kinds of greens and vegetables fresh cut in. The special Gerson soup that's all described in the book, the Hippocrates soup, a baked potato, some cooked vegetables, a glass of carrot and apple juice, and a little yogurt on my baked potato, or a little yogurt and cottage cheese mixed with herbs and so on as a dressing, and some fruit. The book, I hope, is available. Did it arrive? Hey, okay, yes, it's here. Okay, right. Yes, indeed. Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, indeed. Very, very important. My father searched for years for oils that he could use to give the cancer patient. And every time he did, the oil would make the tumors regrow. Until just a short time before he died, he ran across the work of a Dr. Johanna Budwig in Germany, who found that flax seed oil is an excellent material and has the essential fatty acids that the body does require without the damaging oils that restart tumor growth. And we do use the fresh, cold-pressed, organic flaxseed oil. And we give it to the patients 2 tablespoons a day for the first 6 weeks, after that 1 tablespoon a day. And it does produce excellent results. It helps carry oxygen and vitamin A, beta-carotene. It's a very excellent material. But it is the only fat or oil that can be used. All the others, whether it's olive oil or sesame oil or any of the others, corn oil, butter, they all re-stimulate tumor growth. All the others. Rapeseed oil is very dangerous anyway. Okay. Pardon me, what? Yeah, that's right. Cod liver oil is not for cancer patients, and in general, it will supply vitamin A and D. You get lots of vitamin A in the therapy with the carrot juice, so we don't use cod liver oil at all. Yes? Hyperacid stomach or hypoacid stomach, everything begins to balance out if you give the body the proper nutrients and the proper detoxifying and potassium.
So that even if it's getting fruit juices, vegetable juices for the stomach,
Okay, no. We don't do that. What we do in those cases, we don't start with fruit juices that are acid, especially citrus, for instance. Then we mix the juices, as Dr. Gerson shows in the book, perhaps 50-50 with thin-strained oatmeal gruel, which is soothing to the stomach. And the carrot juice is not acid anyway. And so we can start the patients with that until the stomach balances out and heals so that we can use the other juices. We can deal with all of those problems. Like I said earlier, to each patient, the therapy has to be adjusted. and is tailored, okay? Yes? Well, ozone hydrogen peroxide is essentially the same in function and effect. Because in either case, we are dealing with the O radical, with the free O radical that is so active and so helpful. It's the same thing. Okay? Yes? That depends.
Could you address, just in general, herbs and homeopathic medicine or other uses of cell salts?
Okay.
And also, one other thing, some of the new enzyme additives like CoQ10, I believe it is, and there's a product called supergluten algae, which is
Very good. Okay. Well, let me not forget what you started out with. What did we start out with?
herbs.
Okay, herbs. Question is herbs, homeopathy, and new enzymes, etc. Okay, herbs we use. We use some herbs, for instance, peppermint tea is very helpful to activate stomach activity or to overcome nausea and so on. We use chamomile tea, it's very soothing. We use a few other herbs, but I'm sure there are more that we could do in the line of herbs that we haven't. Essentially, the Gerson therapy is all herbs, it's all fruits and vegetables, but never mind. Homeopathy, I'm very much in favor of. Essentially, homeopathy doesn't do much for cancer, but it can help very much in many areas. It can help with pain, it can help with nosodes, getting rid of certain toxic substances, and so on. When it works, I'm all in favor. There's no toxic problem. We're very much opposed to toxic drugs, but homeopathy in these infinitesimal amounts are effective without toxic side effect, so they're fine. A lot of the enzymes we use are very useful and helpful. The OQ10, they're all very useful, oxidizing enzymes. Of course, Dr. Gerson used pancreatic enzymes, other digestive enzymes, all to help the severely damaged cancer patient who doesn't have enough to start to utilize and assimilate the nutrients, so that we don't just pour them in, that we help the body utilize them, okay? So everything that works in the direction of helping the body function, helping it replenish, rebuild, and detoxify, we go along with it.
How about supergluten?
No, I do know certain of the algae extracts, of course, spirulina and so on. They're very helpful, very useful. We use those. Okay, we also use things like clay. Clay, for instance, on a sore, say, arthritic shoulder or elbow or something like that, draws out toxins. It's very, very good for pain relief. Clay, for instance, the montmorillonite clay which we use, is also very good in overcoming diarrheas and toxic problems from, say, chemotherapy. We use clay internally, externally. Very helpful. All these, you know, the old Romans, they used to take mud baths. They had something there. It's good. So there are a lot of things one can and does use. We use a lot of things like packs, clay packs, castor oil packs that are helpful for pain relief instead of drugs. So we don't have to poison the patient. Okay? And it's very good. It works. Yes, there's a lady here.
When you talk about rapeseed oil and other things like that, that if you were eating, let's go back years before we had the ability to process these things like that, it seems that if you need that kind of oil, how are you going to get it from natural foods and things?
You don't. You can't. Because if you eat enough flaxseed to get the oil you need, you eat so much of the body of the flaxseed, which again is a seed, which again is too high in L-arginine, and has the wrong proteins, and you're not supposed to eat those.
Well, shouldn't you, if you're eating properly, eat something that would occur naturally?
Probably you should, and if you're healthy, that's fine. But we are dealing with very sick people. We can't wait until they get to that point.
Then the other question I have is about liver, and the liver juice that's recommended in the diet. I don't really want
Well, I started to touch on that earlier. When Dr. Gerson found out that in 1943 and 4 and 5 his results were not as good, He found that the problem was the insecticides and DDT that the liver could not deal with, that the liver could not metabolize and detoxify. And he found the only way he could deal with that is with the very young calves' livers that had the power to do that. That given to the sick cancer patient whose liver is weak and toxic anyway, added to the cancer patient's diet, this young extra liver from the outside with these nutrients or substances that were in there. I don't even know what they are. My father didn't know what they were. But these enzymes and active materials that were in there did the job for the cancer patient that he couldn't do on his own. The liver needs support. The liver is the main organ that needs the support.
Potassium and the liver extract, can we get that in the health food store?
No.
Or how do we,
Unfortunately, but potassium being a compound, being 3 different salts, is a prescription material. We can get it in Mexico, of course. We can make it ourselves, but it's not quite that simple. Some of these things are not that easy. Okay. Okay, I think time is creeping along here. I'd like to point out we have these brochures out there. They're free. That's the only thing that's free out there. Tells you more about the clinic. And there's also in there a journal which we issued for my father's 100th birthday anniversary, which showed 50 patients of many, many different diseases. They're all spread through the book. Some of them were my father's patients. Many of them are cancer patients, still alive and well, healed. And it gives you a lot of interesting material, also cost, how to get there, how to make appointments. That's all inserted in these various sheets. More recovered patients, etc. So please help yourselves. We also invite memberships. In the back of these, there is membership application forms. You receive the healing newsletters with the importance of organically grown foods, the recovered patients, what's going on with the Gerson therapy. A lot of important material. We invite memberships so that we can continue to function. We do need help. Of course, we have the books now available and some literature, and if you have some questions about that, I'll be out there and help you. So thank you very much for coming. I appreciate your attention. Thank you.